The weight of inheritance. Vivian Hertz stood on the cracked front path, key heavy in her palm as she faced her grandmother's Victorian house. Her inheritance. The February wind whipped her dark hair across her face, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and wet earth. 3 months had passed since the accident, since they'd found her grandmother at the bottom of the main staircase, neck broken, blood pooled beneath her silver hair. The key slid into the lock with familiar resistance. It had always stuck slightly, requiring an upward nudge before turning. Some things never changed. The door groaned open, releasing a rush of stale air that carried the lingering traces of her grandmother's rose perfume. "Home sweet home," Vivian muttered, wheeling her suitcase across the threshold. The hardwood floors creaked beneath her feet, a sound that had once been comforting during childhood summers spent here. Now, in the gathering dusk, each groan seemed to carry a warning. She didn't want to be here. The divorce had left her with few options, though, and refusing an inherited house in this economy would be foolish. Besides, this was her heritage. The Hertz women had lived here for 4 generations. The foyer light switch clicked hollowly. Nothing. Vivian sighed and made a mental note to check the breaker box. She used her phone's flashlight to navigate toward the kitchen, where emergency candles lived in the drawer beside the sink. They were still there, untouched since her last visit 6 months ago. As she struck a match, movement flickered in her peripheral vision. She spun, heart jumping, but the shadows remained still. Just nerves. She was alone in an old house at dusk. Of course she was jumpy. The first week passed in a blur of cleaning and organizing. Vivian took a leave of absence from her graphic design work, using the time to sort through her grandmother's belongings. The house slowly began to feel less like a museum and more like a home. She moved her office into the sunny front room, sent most of her grandmother's clothes to donation, and began to establish new routines. It started small. A coffee mug left on the counter appeared on the dining room table. Her car keys migrated from their hook by the door to the bottom of the stairs. Her grandmother's antique silver hairbrush materialized on her pillow after she distinctly remembered packing it away in the attic. "I'm just scattered," she told herself, ignoring how the air grew thick and cold in certain rooms, how the shadows in the hallway mirror seemed to move independently of their sources. "The divorce has me distracted." But then the noises began. Heavy footsteps paced the upstairs hallway while she worked. Doors slammed in windless rooms. One morning, she woke to find all the kitchen drawers open, their contents strewn across the floor. The knife block had been emptied, each blade standing upright, embedded in the ancient wallpaper like metallic teeth. Vivian's ex-husband Gavin visited after she called him in tears. He stayed an hour, saw nothing unusual, and left with that familiar look of patronizing concern. "You're under a lot of stress, Viv," he said, pausing at the door. "Maybe talk to someone? This place is probably bringing up grief about your grandmother." That night, something pushed her down the stairs. She lay at the bottom, ankle throbbing, staring up at the empty landing where she'd felt solid hands against her back. The air smelled overwhelmingly of roses. The hospital diagnosed a sprain and recommended rest. Alone in her grandmother's house, Vivian began to research. Town records revealed nothing. No tragic deaths, no violent crimes. The house's history was remarkably peaceful until her grandmother's accident, or what they'd called an accident. She found the letters in her grandmother's desk drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom. Yellowed pages covered in familiar spidery handwriting. "It's getting worse. The entity feeds on our pain, our fear. Each generation of Hertz women has faced this choice, endure or leave. I thought I was stronger. Perhaps I was wrong." The last entry was dated 3 days before her grandmother's death. That night, the entity appeared fully for the first time, a dark figure that cast no shadow standing in her doorway. It wore her grandmother's shape like an ill-fitting suit. The attack left 3 broken ribs and questions the emergency room staff carefully didn't ask about the bruises shaped like handprints across her throat. Vivian signed herself out against medical advice and returned to the house one last time. She packed methodically, ignoring the doors that slammed around her, the objects that hurled themselves at her head, the overwhelming scent of roses that made her gag. The sun was rising as she carried her last box to the car. Behind her, every window of the house held a dark figure. She could feel their weight, generations of Hertz women trapped in an endless cycle of violence and obligation. But not her. Not anymore. Vivian drove away as dawn painted the sky blood red. In her rearview mirror, a familiar silhouette watched from her grandmother's bedroom window. She didn't look back again. Some legacies, Vivian had learned, were better left unclaimed. The house would stand, patient as ever, until another Hertz woman came to claim her birthright of shadows and roses. But it wouldn't be her.